The Book of Enoch, Sefer Hanok in Hebrew, and Matzahafa Hanok in Ethiopic, is an ancient Jewish apocalyptic sacred text traditionally ascribed to the prophet Enoch, great-grandfather of Noah. According to scholarly consensus, it is believed to have been written in the Second Temple period, around 300 to 100 BC. Although it isn't part of the Hebrew Bible, it is part of the 81-book Ethiopian Bible, and the complete text was only preserved in Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopian Semitic language. Even though it isn't considered scripture in Christianity and Judaism in our time, except in the Ethiopian and Eritrean churches and among Ethiopian Jews, there is evidence that Enoch was considered scripture in the days of Jesus. First, it had tremendous influence on Second Temple Jewish literature. Enoch's angelic hierarchies, the fall of the Watchers, and eschatological judgment appear in Jewish texts from the period, such as the Book of Jubilees and Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs. Its widespread influence indicates it was a revered text among Jewish groups that viewed it as authoritative or inspired. In addition, fragments of the Book of Enoch, particularly the Aramaic versions, were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Essenes, a Jewish sect associated with Qumran, preserved multiple copies of Enoch, which proves that they held it in high regard, and likely as scripture. The scrolls date to the 2nd century BC to the 1st century AD, the time frame of Jesus' time. Furthermore, the Epistle of Jude, a canonical New Testament text, directly quotes the Book of Enoch, specifically 1 Enoch chapter 1, verse 9. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone. This explicit citation proves that Jude viewed 1 Enoch as a prophetic authority, indicating its scriptural status among early Christians. Some argue that Enoch being quoted in Scripture does not make it Scripture, and they give examples of Paul quoting Epimenides and Menander to prove it, because those are not Scripture. However, Paul did not endorse Epimenides and Menander when quoting them, as he sought to relate to and build bridges with his non-Jewish audience. On the contrary, Jude is directly endorsing Enoch in his epistle. Not only is Jude endorsing Enoch's content, but he is overtly restating inspired prophecy from Enoch to reaffirm its legitimacy. Since the contexts of use are different, Paul's quoting of Epimenides or Menander and Jude's quoting of Enoch are not comparable. The former doesn't at all endorse them, nor does he view their content as sacred, whereas the latter, Jude, boldly reaffirms 1 Enoch as scripture by restating its prophecy, which necessarily makes it inspired, because all prophecy quoted in Scripture is inspired. Moreover, several early church fathers, such as Tertullian, explicitly regarded the Book of Enoch as Scripture, citing its prophetic content. Although this is post-Christ, it shows a continuity of reverence from earlier Jewish Christian traditions, proving that at least some Jewish groups in Jesus' era likely held similar views. Certain concepts in the Book of Enoch, such as the Son of Man as a messianic figure and the coming judgment, are in full agreement with Jesus' teachings in the Gospels. The Book of Enoch was preserved as canonical scripture in the Ethiopic Bible, used by the Ethiopian Jews and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. This shows that some ancient Jewish communities with roots in the Second Temple period treated it as scripture. For more context, there is biblical evidence that the Ethiopians had Old Testament scriptures in the Second Temple period because the Ethiopian eunuch, who hailed from that general region of northeast Africa by the Red Sea and traveled to Jerusalem to worship, was reading the Book of Isaiah. Moreover, the Queen of the South mentioned in 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles is none other than the Queen of Sheba, who visited Solomon from the Sabaean kingdom that encompassed modern-day Yemen, Eritrea, and northern Ethiopia. 3,000-year-old Sabaean temples and artifacts are found in all three countries. Furthermore, genetic evidence currently proves the occurrence of migration from the Levant to Ethiopia during the First Temple period, overlapping with the era of the early Israelite kingdom in the times of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This proves that the Ethiopian tradition was directly connected to the ancient Israelite biblical tradition since BC times, and that the reason Enoch made it into the Ethiopian canon is much more complex than assumed. The Book of Enoch was likely excluded from the Jewish canon at the Rabbinic Academy of Yavne, or the Council of Jamnia between 90 and 100 AD. Whatever the reason for its exclusion, early Christians like St. Jude and notable early church fathers and Jewish groups such as the Essenes recognized its authoritative status. Regarding the historicity of the Council of Jamnia, although a single rabbinic conciliar meeting may not have taken place in history, there is evidence that there was a rabbinic council, a Sanhedrin, established in ancient Yavne, that debated the canonicity of biblical texts and most likely made decisions on the inclusion and exclusion of sacred books, forming what would later become the Jewish canon. The historicity of the council and the role it played serve as proof that the apocryphal books were considered scripture by Hellenistic Jews and Christians in the days of Jesus, or before the late 1st century AD. It is therefore imperative to investigate the historicity of the council and its role from the Christian perspective, vis-a-vis the sacred status of apocryphal books. There is textual evidence based on the Mishnah and Talmud, and archaeological evidence from Yavne, scholarly evidence. Based on that, modern scholars lean toward Yavne as a rabbinic academy that affirmed an existing canon, and circumstantial evidence concerning the historical need for canonization and reform post-70 AD after the destruction of the temple, considering Yavne's significance. Although some scholars may reject the thought, these matters are still open for debate. And the importance of scholarly debates is the thorough and relentless pursuit of truth, by exploring and examining all possible avenues and perspectives until the underlying reality is revealed.